articles that you gave us, items you gave us, Lauren, together. Have we ever considered numbering the pages on the charter? I mean, I know it's simple, but boy, would it be easier to put things together if they were, just a thought. I'm kind of surprised it's not numbered.
I mean, there are some deficiencies in formatting on the current charter, and that may be one of them.
Just a thought. I think it would be more helpful.
Noreen, I like how that was the showstopper.
The one we're editing has numbers
I
on it.
like to look at the big issues here, the real big. For us seniors that have trouble following directions, it would help.
Well,
It's a
Lauren put the numbers in the draft one that we're editing. So that's cool. And they're a little lighter because they're in the footers, but
Is this the one you sent? The one you sent us today or yesterday?
yeah,
or the red
the
line or the red line one from last week.
draft 3-3021 is its title that came out. I think it was yesterday, right? With the
Yeah, with the agenda and all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it here. Yep. I don't see mine must be cutting it off. I don't see page numbers.
No, okay. It's in the electronic version.
That's what I've got. I mean, like that's what I printed up.
Okay, well,
Okay.
if we have no questions for public comment at this time, can we to remind everyone where we are is we're having the land use chairs. Both Lauren and Dave Anderson, I know we're very busy at 8 a.m. this morning, so you guys deserve a lot of praise. And so we're going to talk with them, and then we're going to approve the minutes, and we're going to also take some time to do our review. So hello, Ron.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, I'm fine, sir. How are you?
Hi, Heather.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that.
No problem. And hello, Ryan. So the Duquesses get both the beginning and the end of the municipal day today. That's impressive.
The bookends. Yeah, you get to do both.
So so Dave and I had a conversation in our sort of goal that we talked about last time of doing outreach to the boards on the charter. And frankly, as was discussed this morning a little bit, right, in terms of who does the plan of conservation development and what the scope is, the land use boards can have a lot to say about the charter or not much, depends on how you view it. So Dave, maybe you want to take it from here. I know you spoke to everybody and it's good to see the boards here.
So we did a little bit of outreach just to explain kind of what you guys were up to, and I teed up some kind of broad questions for the various land use boards, such as, does the charter reflect your current responsibilities? Do you think, that your board should be, specifically noted in the charter, or should appointed boards be kind of left out of the charter and more, nimble up to the discretion of the Board of Selectmen? So as you kind of guessed, we have a few takers only. So Ron Clark and Heather and then Ryan Duquesne all jumped in and said, that they'd like to have an opportunity just to have a dialogue with this commission about the charter. And so, but we didn't get into any specific detail. So, we, meaning me, Ron, Heather, and Ryan, haven't talked as a group. I think we'll all be expressing kind of our individual input tonight. So, Joe, I think maybe if you want to tee up the conversation, I think we're eager to jump in, however is helpful for you guys. So it looks like Joe is having a little problem.
So
Joe, we've lost you.
Uh-oh.
hi, sorry, Dave, I used all my internet allowance on the Board of Selectmen meeting, evidently.
Yeah.
So
not getting that time back.
Yeah, if I fade out again, Liz, if you kind of lead us through it. But
Sure.
the rough ideas, the things we've been talking about are, we talk a lot about the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen. And because the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen talk a lot about the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen. So trying to get that right. And also we're in the budget process. We've talked a lot about what it means to include something in the charter. Once it's charterized, then you're stuck with it until the next vote. And there's been a thought to take some of the boards and move them out of the charter because it doesn't make sense. certainly for PCC and CBA and inland wetlands, those are required. So that I guess that we could change the structure of them as there's some flexibility within management, and inland wetlands reports to the deep really. So we could, but do they need to be in the charter? And then I think there's a broader issue of we're facing sea level rise, more complicated questions of what economic development means. Are there things within the process that, and probably sort of a good time as we're talking about the plan of conservation and development, where we should include things in the charter that we otherwise haven't today? So I don't know if anyone from the
Yeah,
commission,
Joe,
and Dave, if you wouldn't mind, just you and your members, if you guys would just do a quick introduction and tell
Yeah.
our other board members who may not be as familiar with you what board you represent.
Sure. So I'm Dave Anderson. I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development. And so I work with pretty much all the land use agencies, the Economic Development Commission. Nice to meet everybody.
Ron,
Al, Ron Clark from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Heather.
Hi, Heather Crawford. I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission and have been on it since it was a gleam in Joan O'Neill's eye in 2006, 2004 actually, where we were formed after the 2000 Plan of Conservation and Development was passed. So actually, I'm looking forward to a rewrite.
And Ryan.
Ryan Duquesne, I'm the chair of economic development.
Perfect. So, and all these boards, impact, towns have 4 powers, basically. They have police powers, they have power to provide services, they can tax you, and they can tell you what to do with your land. And these boards sort of touch on really, at least, if not all 4, certainly a lot of them.
So Joe, in response to kind of teed it up a little bit. So, regarding appointed commissions, whether or not they should be listed in the charter specifically. As an example, there's a flood and erosion control board listed in the charter, and it says there shall be a flood and erosion control board consisting of 5 members. So right now, there's legislation up in Hartford actually proposing changing what a flood and erosion control board is and adding element of climate change to it. And then that board is actually prescribed to have, I think, 9 members under the governor's bill. And so with this language in a charter, if that were to be passed, it could cause some angst for the town of Madison and not allow us to be very nimble in terms of making sure if we want to take advantage and constitute a 9-member flood and erosion control board, because I'd be a little bit concerned that this language might be limiting in terms of our ability to do so. So that's just one example of maybe some impacts from having some of these things prescribed in the charter rather than having the Board of Selectmen having the power to, appoint these boards and commissions, or having the process laid out in the charter, whether it requires town meeting or not. I think would be, to me, a more appropriate strategy. Certainly, I think you can say that all these boards are important, and you want the charter to enable them and not necessarily make it very easy for somebody to just say, we don't need a flood and erosion control board, or we don't need a conservation commission. So I think the process should still be pretty stringent on terms of, both creating and abolishing boards and commissions. But the specificity of each of the things that are in this particular section, I think may be something you might want to take a look at to see if it's really necessary. So I don't know, Joe.
Ryan, would you maybe do a moment just on economic development? I'm sorry?
Yeah, sure. In terms of economic development, one of the things I noted in our current charter was there, with the exception of outlining how many members it would be on the commission, there was no other information regarding kind of a charge or I guess any kind of direction. And I wasn't sure, given I did kind of look through, other boards that had varying levels of charge, incorporated into their kind of their description. It didn't know if it would be worthwhile to perhaps take this opportunity to kind of ease in to a charge that included economic sustainability and development in relation specifically to our grand list, which is kind of the one of the metrics and benchmarks that we can, you know, at least most easily correlate any of our progress to. So I'm not sure if that's, you know, the kind of, you know, suggestions that we're looking to kind of incorporate. I think we don't want to box ourselves in, you know, to the current commission or future commissions into kind of a very rigid framework of what the expectations are. But I think that perhaps providing a little bit of a description as to what the town is looking for in terms of the Economic Development Commission may be helpful.
So, Ryan, thank you. That was one of the points that we had looked at also, that some of the boards and the commissions don't have a lot of direction or even a description. So where, for all of you, where do you get your principles from to guide you to move forward? Where are those?
I was just actually looking at the Conservation Commission charge again and going in what was in the charter and going, oh, we have the second longest one in the charter. And I'm not sure whether that's because we were a new commission or because, quite frankly, when we were formed, I'm sorry, in historical terms, the first selectman really didn't want us at the time. So we're actually quite constrained by our charge. It's with the 7 members. There has been discussion over the years, since it says that our duties are to serve as a technical advisor on natural resources to any town board or commission or committee. The question is whether we advise them whether they want it or not, or do we only get to advise them when they ask us to. Conduct research into possible land utilization of land areas within Madison, but do not make or issue regulations, levy fines, or other penalties. And then it said we can't be members of the Inland Wetlands Agency, water pollution, and anything that we would be in conflict with. So it was interesting because it was it's a sort of a summary of the charge that was actually given when we were formed, but it's basically the very limiting us a little bit in terms of what we can or can't do, but it does give us direction. And that's pretty much where we've taken it over the years too. You know, the question has been in whether or not we're providing advice. How do we get people to ask us for advice if they don't want it? How do we fit into the town structure? You know, because, you know, we have a lot of technical expertise in our volunteers, and because we are strictly advisory, not regulatory, which I love that part. I'm not going to say I want to be regulatory, but sometimes getting anybody to ask us something before they do something gets difficult sometimes. So
And
I don't know how to put that into the charter, but
well, I think one of the things we talked about, and Matt, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is it seems to us that a lot of boards run on tradition, that you know what your job is because you go into a board and you talk about it. So there are a lot of ways that you could handle the budget process. Frankly, economic development could mean an awful lot between running the chamber or, you know, advising the plan of conservation development. It could be a big span. And one of the things we started to talk about is your new member.
Again.
How do you know what to do? Charter.
Yeah, and I'll take a stab at answering that. I think I've been on EDC for maybe 13 or 14 years now, and we have kind of pivoted to some extent during that duration of time. You know, initially we were focused on what I would call kind of in the innovation world like a Horizon 3 or something like way out in the future, like with the Bradley Road Vision Study as an example of some of the work that we did years and years ago. Great work. I think that in more recent times, especially, for example, the last year, given the pandemic, we have focused on more short-term initiatives to help to kind of support our existing business environment, our existing businesses even over the last several years to try and promote, job growth and other sustainable efforts kind of in our downtown district. But that does come through tradition or the makeup of the board. And I would say for an economic development commission, that's probably a good thing. I mean, you want to be able to be nimble. You certainly want to be able to embrace the talents and the passion areas of the current commission. And I think good things can come from that. I don't know if that's appropriate for other boards or commissions in town that have more specific goals that may have to have better boundaries.
And Ron, I was wondering if you could just take a moment or two and describe what the PCC does, because I don't know that every member of the Charter Review Commission actually knows what you do. I will presage that by saying largely the PCC has two roles. Sometimes it sits almost like a judging agency, and sometimes it's a legislative body making up the rules of land use, but there's a lot more to it. And Ron, if you could maybe even talk to us a little bit if you have any thoughts about structural issues that affect your board.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. And thanks,
Ron.
And us. Planning and zoning is just as the name implies, there's two parts to it. Planning, which has to do with the general framework of how land is zoned and used. We also have responsibility for the plan of conservation and development, mainly to coordinate it, not to develop it. There's a whole bunch of other parties that help formulate the COPD. And we kind of are maybe the captain of the team and may have the final tweaking portion of it, but it's a town-wide effort. We do not ourselves create it, and that's the way it should be. The other part of it is the zoning part of it, and that has to do with actual specific land use applications, things that are not, well, if you owned a 5-acre lot and wanted to build a house on it, and it met all the zoning regulations that were planned and in place, that would be no problem to get a building permit. But when I do something differently or something of a larger scale, then we do sit in judgment of those applications, and through can be a rather complex process, and through a public process, reach a conclusion or decision to permit, deny, or modify that particular use. We happen to be going through one now that it's become rather controversial here near the center of town. So those are, kind of, I would say, the three hats we wear. We're under every statutory regulation, as well as, of course, the charter. In terms of the composition, I've had a couple of people ask me, we're a relatively large board. We have 9 members, regular members, and 3 alternates. Is that an ideal number? I don't know what the ideal number would be. It's obviously been that way since I've been on it, and long before then. I find, in terms of the number, the plus is certainly that there's a diversity of thought and opinion, and it spreads out the opinions that are received as we reach conclusions, particularly in zoning matters. I've also been asked whether it should be, elected or appointed. And I feel with every fiber in my body that appointment is really the only way to go, primarily because, several reasons, but primarily that when we're sitting on applications, we're sitting in judgment. The applicant has legal rights. The public and those who oppose it have legal rights through the courts. And although we're not judges, we act much the same way. And I think we all know what the downside is to electing judges. That isn't a wise thing to do. It would also make it more difficult to, I think, attract and keep qualified people. I think all of the boards and commissions, have that problem more often than they'd like to. There are 18,000 people in town, but not everyone is raising their hand to serve, whether it be on P&Z or EDC or conservation. You move it into the elected world, and that becomes, I think, even more of a challenge.
I would
So-
have to strongly support that. I can't imagine, we can't keep a 7-member commission fully staffed, as it were, when we're just volunteering and appointing. If you told people they had to go through an election process, they
Yeah.
wouldn't have anybody, including me.
If I could just jump to the side for a minute, I'm involved with one of the town committees and involved with some of the recommendations that come to the BOS for appointment. And I don't know whether these groups are in the charter or they're not, but there are a number of commissions, committees, if you will, that are vestigial. The one that pops to the front of my head is the Building Code Board of Appeals. It's my understanding that group years and years ago would act like a ZBA when towns had their own building code. Well, there is no such thing as a local building code anymore. It's all state, the state code.
Quite recently.
Huh?
Quite recently.
Well, quite recently, but they haven't met in years. And whether they should be moved over, if they're in the charter, moved out of it, so that could be, the books could be cleaned up a bit, would be a thought or a suggestion, not a big deal. I also have had, the Town Landscape Committee, which I think has 15 openings on it. It's a huge committee. And as long as I can remember, there were 2 people on it, Gunnar and Eileen Johnson,
Oh, yeah.
who ran it all by themselves. They didn't need any help from anybody. They did such a terrific job with it. But that's an aside, and I'll leave it at that. That's maybe something that could be taken a glimpse of.
Actually, Ron, if I could ask you just one question about that point,
Yeah.
is that one conversation we've been having is how to open access. If Al Goldberg were here, he'd be reciting his line. It takes 200 volunteers to power the town of Madison. And one of the things we've been talking about is how do you get people? I mean, so they go through the town committees, but we sort of want to open that middle lane too, to try and encourage, as the number of unaffiliated grow in town, encourage to come in. And as somebody who deals with people approaching a committee, what would make it so people become more engaged and want to volunteer more? Is there anything structurally that you think would help?
I'd have to give it a little thought, Joe. I'd say one thing, there is a mechanism, and that's thanks to the town, that unaffiliateds have the opportunity to apply directly to the Board of Selectmen or through a party of their choice to sit on a board or committee. I'd say, interestingly, and I think if I was to ask this question to the 12 members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, no one would get the answer right, because we are as apolitical as it can possibly be. And I mean that from the bottom. I always has been.
Yeah.
Even when you were.
That's true. It's one of the great parts about it.
But the interesting thing right now on P&Z is 12 members, 5 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 4 unaffiliated, which I think is an interesting statistic.
And the unaffiliated, did they apply through the parties? Because I know sometimes parties, I can remember actually several, when Noreen and I were selectmen together, approving people that were unaffiliated but endorsed by one party or the other. Or are they coming, how's that channel going? I know this is slightly off to the side of land use, but keeping the commissions full is important,
2 of them, 2 of them applied, I think, sent in an application, maybe through the Republican Party, but they were unaffiliated. One went directly for reappointment. I say, bypassed, if you will, and that's not a negative, but applied directly to the Board of Selectmen for reappointment, and he was. But it is, I think, a little bit more of a challenge for unaffiliated voters to feel welcome, but it certainly has not stood in the way of getting these people. And I take no credit for it. It's the Board of Selectmen who appoint them, not the Planning and Zoning Commission or me on a town committee. But I'd have to give that a little thought.
Well, thanks.
I think as Dave Anderson said this morning at the Selectmen's meeting, one of the benefits of the Zoom world we've been living in for the past year is that is unquestionably made it easier for people to view, if not participate in meetings of the various boards and committees. And maybe that ignited a little bit of spark in some folks to take more of an interest, get more involved. I think we had at our last public hearing on, I think it was the 18th of March. I think we had, what, Dave, about 150 people?
Yeah, that's right.
Somewhere around there.
In that case, the Charter Review Commission should come to one of your meetings. We'll do it that way. Just put us on the agenda. We'll do our review.
So Joe, I just want to make one more point. Ron, there was something that you said that resonated, the diversity of thought. And I think that we struggle with getting enough people fresh voices who want to come in to participate here, so that we truly do have that diversity of thought. Some of the input that we received is, how do we future-proof, for the town going forward? So I guess, to Joe's points, just structurally for all the boards, is there a way to change things to ensure that diversity of thought?
To change the diversity of thought?
Or just to incorporate, to make sure that the boards evolve with the thoughts of the town or the principles of the town, that you always have those opposing the dialogue that's necessary for your boards. It's appropriate.
Yeah.
Matt, I just want to say that's what the good part of these open meetings are.
Mhm.
And I know the P&Z meets twice a month, and one of them was a planning meeting. And Ron, I don't know if you still encourage it, but it used to be you could go and talk, not just about a specific project, because believe me, they do show up for that. But I think the boards being open and being encouraged, I'm just off the top of my head, been on the recommendations committee for the Republicans. And I know in the last few years, we've put somebody on the Madison Youth Services. And when I approached her, she just doesn't want to be involved in politics, but she's a really good member. And so we're really happy to have her, but she had to be really kind of coddled a little bit. She was uncomfortable with the whole process. She'd never run for office. That's just not her style. Our senior services, our co-director, again, an unaffiliated, and we encouraged him to do it. So we can go out and get good people. Planning and zoning, we have, well, you said 4, but I know of one that we appointed that is just outstanding. We're so lucky to have him. And I'm sure they're all wonderful, but I just have followed his career. He went to school with one of my boys. And Beach and Rec, I believe the chairman. So this is being done. And as these new people come with different ideas and get them to join. But then again, I think every public hearing we have, and it's great to hear what Dave said this morning about the Zoom meetings being better attended, because most of these meetings aren't well attended. And then, matter of fact, it's gotten worse over the last 15 years. But I think we just have to keep encouraging that. And I don't think any chairman in our town that I know of ever wields the kind of power that expects anybody on his board to think the way he does. I think people respect that more, that these are all diverse thinkers.
That's because most of those chairmen had you as a member at one point in time, Noreen, so they know that would be impossible.
I'm just going to say, from the Conservation Commission point of view, at the moment we have 6 members. One of them is a Republican, the rest of them are Democrats. In our terms of we were used to be more balanced, but we've been having a really, really hard time getting anybody that's a Republican to apply. And when the ones that do apply don't last for very long. And we have not got, this is kind of scary, but we don't have anybody that lives south of Green Hill Road.
Oh.
And we used to have 2 members that lived on the shoreline, and given the number of applications we get. So I'm like, I really would like to see diversity of location within the community. For my board, I mean, we used the ones that used to, it's like, I live down there, I walk past that twice a week, and that's not a good place for something like that. I miss that sort of input from the sort of south of Post Road or even south of Green Hill. We just don't have it anymore.
Ron, can I ask you a question about, it looks like they're 4-year terms for the P&Z. And are there any term limits, or can you have consecutive terms?
Oh, you can have consecutive terms. Again, it takes an appointment or reappointment by the Board of Selectmen. So if someone has overstayed their welcome, just like of someone finishing their first 4 or their 36 to 40, the options are still the same. I do think that there is a advantage to, and I'm not saying this because I've been on a while, but there is an experience that comes with, how things work. As time goes by, you become more familiar with the regulations and the rights of applicants, the rights of the opposition. So that's helpful. I don't think that it requires, in fact, it may work in the reverse if you have people who, there are some darn good people on that commission right now that are in their second, maybe their third term. And hate to sound corny, but like wine, they get better over time.
Yeah.
So, I may be at the other end of the spectrum, Liz. So if you want to pick me out and bounce me up here, right ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think it's more in the context of, is it 2-year, 4-year? I mean, what's most effective for, and that is, obviously getting up to speed, regs and those type of things. It's not easy. So there's definitely something to say for how long a term is.
I don't know anything better or anything different. I will say that there have been, maybe 1 or 2 folks who have been appointed to the board in my memory, and I'm going back quite a bit of time, who after the rubber hit the road, really, they had an agenda. They really had no business, objectively serving. And so they could have been gone in 2 years instead of 4. I don't know. But as it turns out, I think both of them left before they, their 4-year periods were up. But I don't see it as, there's probably more pluses to 4 than there are minuses, Liz, in my mind.
So
That's actually, go ahead, Joan, please.
I've got a question because I think all 3 of you are chairs, right? Or prior chairs. There's actually a limit within the charter of only 2 years in length. Shall not exceed, the chairmanship shall not exceed 2 years in length. I don't think there's any board or commission that's actually following this, I have to say, since I was liaison to a lot of them. And
Inland wetland does. They're the
Inland
only ones
wetland
that I
does.
know of.
Okay,
I
so we've
keep
got-
trying to give up the chairmanship. I really do.
Though I believe
So
each
the question
board
is-
reelects their chair. annually,
Right,
though.
but in the charter, it says the term for chairman of all such boards and commissions shall not exceed 2 years in length.
Right, which
So-
would mean that when you're elected, you can't be elected for more than 2 years. But I don't read that as saying that you can't then serve a consecutive second term or
Okay,
third or
so-
fourth or 15th.
I think we should probably clarify that then,
Yeah.
because it can be read 2 different ways. So I think, I'm not looking to limit to 2 years, trust me on this one. I think whoever is elected by that board, and it should be taking place in January's, then I think that's who should be elected. But I think we need to clarify that because I think it's shall not exceed 2 years in length gives the impression that there's going to be every 2 years a turnover of the chairmanship.
And I'm sorry, Heather, did you say that you were also on the Inland Wetlands Committee?
No, I just said we do a lot of interaction with the Inland Wetlands Committee, and they actually change their chair every 2 years. They basically tell people, you're going to be chair for 2 years at some point.
Oh, got it.
And quite honestly, that has gotten some people to be chair that were surprisingly good at it, and it's also led to a couple of disastrous years. So, I just,
Is there any,
say that?
if we think about, oh, go ahead.
Let me just throw out, it's probably a very naive question, but Ron, if one comes before your organization asking for a zoning variance,
Mhm.
and are there written criteria as to say what grounds are legitimate and what are not?
Well, I can try to answer that. We establish the zoning regulations. For example, let's say setback from the front yard is 25 feet. Those are our regs. If you, for some reason, wanted to put your porch 20 feet, you would go before the zoning board of appeals, an elected board. We don't play in that arena. We have our rules. If you want an exception to it, you go to the ZBA. And they deal, and maybe this is something Joe could comment on with his legal background, but they deal with what are called hardships. And I had one person ask me, I'll tell you what isn't a hardship. Their parents were buying a house in town that had a 2-car garage, and they wanted to add a third bay to the garage, and it would infringe on the setbacks. And the woman told me the hardship was my father has a 3rd car. That isn't what a hardship is. Joe, would you care to comment as to what a legal hardship is?
A hardship's basically the idea is the zoning rules are set up in your neighborhood for a bunch of square lots, or rectangular lots, and you own the one triangular lot, and suddenly you can't build a house, but you could, and it really wouldn't impact anyone. That's the classic example. Another example, Ron, you might recall, I can't remember whether it's Madison or one of the other towns, someone tried to apply for a variance so they could put in a helicopter port because the hardship was the commute from New York is really long. Hardships run with the land, not with the people. So that's the thing. So for Ron's committee, so let's assume for a second, Rob, you decide you want to, your big dream was to open a gas station in the middle of town. If you came in, the town has rules for some uses that you can just do, and some uses you have to apply for. And in those applications, they have standards that you would apply. You'd have to show there's no impact. You have to show sufficient sight line. You'd have to, there's a series of requirements, and those are spec'd out. And if they're not, you'd say they were vague, and you would have a pretty good case to approach them. So it's in the commission's interest to make them say, we're deciding based on a range of this.
And that would be done.
Go ahead,
That would be
Ron.
in a public hearing environment. That wouldn't be something that we would just decide upon with an up and down vote. Special exceptions and those types of things require public hearings, and is always in full public view. Did that answer, Robert? Did that answer your question about you asked about getting a variance?
Yes, thank you very much. Absolutely.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, Ron. One thing Ron said, Robert, to pay attention to is at some point in that process, the public will come in and they'll have their say, whether it's a neighbor or whatever. But everybody will get a chance to say how they're being impacted by this. And I think that's really what's great about small towns, because that's a major part of any decision that's made, that they really listen to the public. It's just not black and white. It's not that, black and white all the time. And it's very transparent, which is what you want. And the P&Z does a great job, and they always have of that part of it.
And we definitely see that playing out right now too. So it is a good process.
Right.
But the point is that people, ourselves included, that public participation and direction is a great thing. But as I mentioned, applicants in particular have legal rights in situations like this. That public participation does not turn it into a referendum. It doesn't become a town meeting and they vote how we're going to tell us how we're going to vote. We take it all into account and into consideration, and on balance, ultimately arrive at our decision independently, all 9 of us. And of course, we have 3 alternates, and they're seated when we're shorthanded. So.
Of all of our boards, PCC has the most rules by which they operate, by the nature of how they function, and because there's litigation in the area. No one ever leaves a zoning commission meeting actually happy. If you went there and you got what you wanted, then you think you didn't have to go. And if you went there and didn't get what you wanted, then they just didn't understand. So as a result, it needs to be an open process, but it is a tested process. If we could think for a second, kind of big in terms of just structurally, is there anything about your commissions and Dave, maybe if you sort of think about the view of all of them, information that is developed, directions of the town that are developed where you don't have participation. So for instance, we have town processes on capital budgeting. We have town processes. Would you rather, for instance, have parts of the plan of conservation and development, have a defined role so the Board of Selectmen have to support it? I mean, are there kind of those big things that happen that are outside of your reach but affect you in some way? And I don't, where you need to be integrated into some, or at least even made aware of things. So I know that's a somewhat vague question, but that's the kind of thing the charter can do if we know there's a problem. And my guess is if you have to think about it for a long time, it might not be a problem.
So
But
I'm going to take a crack at maybe responding to that question, but maybe redirecting it a little bit too, because
please go ask the better question.
Yeah, well, I think, Ryan, Ron, and Heather, as chairman of appointed boards, have kind of a unique perspective on how town government functions. So, and that perspective might not just directly relate to their board or commission. So I think it would be interesting to talk, because, when you asked that question, part of me thought, well, what's one thing I think that negatively impacts some of the boards and commission I work with? And I would say lack of continuity of leadership, in the town government. I think that negatively impacts the boards. And so for me, I think that opens up the conversation, which I know you're having because I've observed a few of your meetings, is the idea of a town manager is part of that discussion potentially. But there's other issues, Joe, I know you and I talked about, shouldn't the boards and commissions get together, once a year, twice a year, quarterly, and the chairs all have a conversation about, what each commission's working on, what the strategy is for the town, what's the plan of conservation and development calling us to do. I think some of that is relevant, but it all points to just there's not a continuity that's happening right now, and there is a little bit of a operation in silos. So, I think maybe I'm sure everybody has a perspective on that they might want to share.
Dave, I think you're right. I think from my perspective on EDC, and Joe, and you were there way back. I don't know how many years ago. That was 14 years ago, maybe 13 years. And there is a lack of continuity, and quite honestly, even just a lack of direction. So I've been chair now of EDC through Fillmore, Tom, and now Peggy, and there really hasn't been an opportunity for leadership to come in and even set the tone of kind of their administration. I reached out to Peggy when she first walked in the door, and kind of wanted to get a kind of a sense in terms of what the goals were going to be for kind of her administration. But, and I know, of course, COVID has come in, but quite honestly, there hasn't been any interaction really with Peggy and the EDC, for example, in terms of like, what are the goals of her administration and what would she like to see from her boards and commissions? And perhaps she's more involved, for example, in other boards and commissions than economic development. But I think, Dave, you used the word silo, and I think that's right. I think there are often times, we do have a liaison for finance and the Board of Selectmen, but those are, kind of informational, and, there's not a lot of coordinated effort through those liaisons on kind of setting goals and initiatives. So I think you're right, Dave, and I think that does happen due to attrition.
I will also say that siloing is a huge issue. And in terms of communication, at this point, I do not even know who the selectman liaison is to the Conservation Commission. I've had one liaison that ever attended a meeting, and that was Bob Hale back several years ago. So, okay, wine. And part of it's because one of our meetings directly conflicts with the Board of Selectmen, but we have another meeting that doesn't. And the other issue is that, with the siloing and with, semi-fiefdoms occasionally occurring within the town administration, there's been times where I've had calls from somebody up at the Department of Long Island Sound Programs going, so what do you think about this project that's going on in Madison? And going, first I've heard of it. Oh, so there are things where we could really provide input to town projects that people are developing, and they never think to even, ask us. So,
Well,
Uh,
go ahead, Ron, please.
I think our situation may be a little bit different in P and Z, where because of the legalities involved in many aspects, we have to live a good part of our life in a silo. We cannot, ex parte communications and things of that nature with applications. We cannot involve ourselves in those discussions, and we shouldn't. And in all my time on the commission, I've never had a selectman or member of the Board of Selectmen approach me at any time. And I'm Joe, I'm sure you had the same experience, trying to influence or find out or stick their nose into anything that's going on. It's just, it's not legal for all intents and purposes. We do live in a silo. On the other hand, these same folks field multiple phone calls from people who are complaining about this application for this particular project, and they take the flack, which is a political problem for them. And we talked about town manager. Can I take a minute and just share a little perspective that I got on by osmosis? Years ago, back in the day when cell towers were all the popular rage being developed in the state of Connecticut, nobody wanted one anywhere. My group, I was with Southern Wheel and Telephone at that time, was tasked with building out the system. And those days, 150, 180 foot towers were the norm. And we'd send groups out looking for suitable properties that met coverage requirements and what have you. I learned early on that the smartest thing we could do was for someone like myself to go out and meet with the boss of the town, so to speak, and tell them what we are going to start doing ahead of time. Realizing that the worst thing that can happen to them, if somebody talked to a farmer and they talk to the farmer next door, there's a cell tower coming and they call the first selectman of the town manager, don't know anything about it, that's not fair to them. So it was kind of like a preview. And what I learned early on, and I think I've met with over 60 back in the day of these folks, that when you went into a municipality that had a town manager, you were talking to a professional who knew what the implications were, what the ramifications were, knew the siting council, how it would be handled. It was just a whole other level of expertise I was dealing with. And I'll always remember that. It was without exception. So I've always thought that town managers, in concept, are not a bad idea. And the only analogy I will draw, and then I'll stop, is that we elect our Board of Education. We elect our chairman. The chairman doesn't become the superintendent of schools. And municipal government in itself, not Board of Ed, has become so complex in this day and age that a lot can be said for a true manager who can administer to the town's affairs while his boss or bosses, in the event of a Board of Selectmen, handle that management, his oversight, and then of course deal with the political aspects of running a town. So I know Noreen disagrees with you about this, but I respect that, and I hope she would respect my perspective. That's all, for my 2 cents and what it's worth. So I'll leave it at that.
I have another question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Joan.
So, land use folks, currently, does it make sense to modify the process so that each application needs to go through inland wetland conservation and then end up at P&Z, so inland wetland conservation, can give recommendations or something like that? Is that a possibility?
Well, I won't get into the legalities of it for wetlands in particular. If it's not rural wetlands, what are we running by them? But they have some statutory responsibilities that any regulated activity that occurs in Madison within 100 feet of a wetland must be processed by and heard through inland wetlands. In fact, we cannot act on an application until we have a referral or report from wetlands and their assessment of the impact of this project on the wetlands itself. So I think that's already in place, Joan. Not every application, but not every application is near a wetlands. As far as conservation is concerned, there are times we have looked to them. We've gotten good feedback. There are times we have not gotten a report, and that's been useful. But I think we clearly need to delineate where the responsibilities are. I'll cite a case in point with all due respect to Heather, and I don't know whether she was aware of this, but a couple of, or was involved in this, but a couple of years ago, maybe more, we had an application for someone wanted to, I think, subdivide a house, or subdivide a property and put a house on the other property. And it was near a wetlands. And it came in before us and they had all their plans. This is where the house was to be located. It met all of the zoning requirements, you know, setbacks and all of these things. It was far enough from the wetlands that wetlands was satisfied with it. And they were suggesting or telling the applicant, or maybe to us, I don't want to overstate what it said was, that they should move the house 50 feet further from the wetland. You know, now, I don't know how in the world we could legally do that. They met all the zoning regulations. Would it have been better? Certainly. Marginally, absolutely. But, you know, to tell somebody that's gone to an architect, drawn the plans, here's, you know, septic goes here, this goes that, and to just think that we have the right to move it 50 feet is just not reality. I'm sure we'd have some litigation over that. So getting more from conservation, sure, but I think there has to be an understanding as to.
Right. I don't know if this is was an inland wetland or a coastal wetland.
Forget, Heather, to be honest.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens is that, for example, the coastal wetlands are administered differently than inland wetlands. I'm a coastal biologist. There's this whole thing with buffer areas and 50-foot setbacks. And what we have always written is advisory. And it's like the state has a, minimum 25-foot setback, recommended 50-foot setback from tidal marshes. And we say, the house, they've designed the house so it's sitting at 25 feet, bare minimum, sea level rise, really recommend it's all in the best, and that's part of where it comes back to the, we are there. It says in our charter that, we would love pre-application. We have had in the almost 15 years now, 3 pre-applications, people come to us going, we're thinking about this, we're thinking about that. And we're like, awesome. We're so glad you're here. Here, did you know that your parcel has this, that, or the other thing? And they're like, and one of them was like, yeah, and we're planning all around that. Awesome. Yep. And other ones have been, oh my God, I had no idea. So that's one where it's like, and a lot of times, now that we have Dave, in the early days, we got those and it was great. And now that we have Dave gets a lot of those pre-application kind of things. But it's like, it's, yes, you've gone to the architect, you've planned all this out, but did the architect actually think about what the coastal zone regulations were, or did he just go, yeah, this would be really nice right here? So we have made comments over the years, I know, that are like, well, this would be a whole lot better if you had thought about this before you put all the money into the planning, and we're really sorry. And then, they get passed. And it's like, but it's, we're trying to educate
right.
Commission, all the commissions, and the person that put in the application, and frankly, the person that did the architect. It's like, okay, you did that all, if you thought about this one thing ahead of time, we wouldn't be telling you horrid things.
I understand that. And I'm just citing that as one example where was, I won't say even problematic, that's too strong a word. But someone who's in and has a lot and wants to build a house, they take out a building permit because they meet all the regulations.
Yeah.
In some respects, that's the same thing. If they're looking to do this and it meets all the regulations, we cannot dictate that you're going to move your house 50 feet because it would be better. Wait a minute, we comply with the law, we comply with the building code, yada, yada. And that's where sometimes issue arise. In the reverse of that, we have, and I can't talk about it at all in any depth, but we have an application that's been going on for a while on Longshore Lane that involves inland wetlands, coastal wetlands, and a lot of elements, and conservation. We run joint site walk with them not too long ago.
Yeah.
And we sought out their input, and boy, we got it, and it's been very useful. So to get it on everyone, I think Joan is trying to answer your question. I'm not so sure, but to get it on the ones where it's needed, yes, and it's appreciated.
Joan,
One of the reasons. Okay,
I would
just
just
want to.
chime in for one quick second, Joan, is that you can't trigger inland wetlands like Ron said, because they really can't talk about things outside of their zone.
Right.
And ZBA is by function. So they have a totally, if you don't apply to ZBA, you don't activate them. Really conservation, and I can't quite think of another one, Dave, unless there's any other.
Well, now the Coastal Resiliency Commission gets into some of these discussions too.
Of course. Yeah, but conservation's created to be advisory. Doesn't have to be, by the way. It has extra powers under the statute. And one of the questions should be, should we charterize it as it is? Could be a future first selectman might want to expand it. The Conservation Commission can run land, for instance.
Yeah, the reason that I brought it up is at one point in time, we were considering doing an addition, and I was somebody was out to my property to take a look at what we were doing on our third floor under a building permit that we had at the time. And I said, I may want to add the garage. And he literally went to my wetland, because I have a wetland that runs through my property. And he took a measuring tape out and he walked and he put an X and he goes, "You're safe as long as you just stop here." That's it. Like that. So, and I had no idea that that would even be a concept. Do you know what I mean? Because my driveway goes over the wetland and is very close to the wetland. So at the time the whole house was built, it was obviously a very different situation, but I found it very helpful at the time when we were having discussions, quite frankly, before we brought in any kind of architect or anything. We never got the project done, but anyway.
It's interesting to note, though, and I don't know how it was measured, and I'm sure this person knew what they were talking about, and I'm not a wetlands expert, except I do know that it is not where it's wet. Wetlands are determined by the quality of the soil, and a wetland can be considerably larger than just this marshy area. And it really takes a small amount of digging and probing by soil scientists to determine where the wetlands actually begin and end. So it's an interesting science and not simple. And I take my hats off to those folks. They have a lot to consider. And I'm seeing more of it now firsthand with the Ledges application. They had to continue it, last night at their meeting. So it's a complicated subject.
Not the least of which is the town also has substantial property that would be governed by the Army Corps of Engineers because it abuts WOTA, so Water of the United States.
Right.
Dave, I wanted to ask a question sort of out of my own head. The first selectman under our charter has an obligation to provide a financial state of the town issue, talk about the budget, come in and present the town's financing plan. Would there be any interest in putting the obligation of the first selectman or someone else to meet with these boards? I'm sort of thinking about, Ryan's point about, first it's hard, right? Dave, you become first selectman, congratulations. You've got 2 years. You have to figure out what these boards do. It takes more than 2 years sitting on the boards to figure out what they do exactly. Then you're running for election again, and maybe in 3 terms, you'll spend a few minutes and you'll figure it out. But on the other hand, should we ever trigger an update of the plan of conservation development, a report to the town on land use and resilience, from the Board of Selectmen? Just like we do it for money, why shouldn't we do it from our literally the POCD with a resilience thrown in? Which is, if I have my way, is what I would change it to. Do you know of any towns that do that type of planning? Because, Ron mentioned, he's right. When in an application, he's siloed, but they have an entire planning function and they steer the town plan, the plan of conservation development.
Well, when I reviewed the POCD this morning a little bit with the Board of Selectmen, I mentioned that the steering committee that coordinated the POCD was made up of 25 individuals. 5 of those were just citizens at large, but 20 of them were from existing boards and commissions. And so there was through that process, through that 2-year process, there was a lot of collaboration going on between those boards. So to the extent that you could put some language in the charter that would encourage that type of collaboration to continue, I think I'd be supportive of something like that. Exactly how that language would read, I don't know. But I think it's an interesting idea for sure. I think the Board of Selectmen are coming, at least this Board of Selectmen, the sitting Board of Selectmen is coming to a different understanding about the importance of the plan of conservation and development and how it can be a decision-making tool for them as well, not just for the land use boards. And so I know we're going to make a bit of an effort to involve the Board of Selectmen more robustly. I know, Joe, you were listed in the steering committee for the current POCD, but maybe even more involve the board more fully in this next round. So I like your thinking on that, and I'd be happy to to come back and discuss that in more detail. But anything that kind of makes that conversation happen more regularly would be helpful.
Yeah, that's the type of thing that we can charterize. If suddenly the land use, the resilience, the economic plan of the town requires report by the lead elected official, well, guess what? That means once a year they're checking in with you. And I know that's not much, but that might be something. Noreen, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Joe, thank you. I just want to thank you. This has been a great conversation. I thank you for it. One of the things Heather brought up in the beginning that I think would help us moving forward with this, the changes in the charter is you brought up the Conservation Commission in the charter has more said about it than, and I remarked about that. I think Joe made the comment that he wrote most of it. Can't remember if he was kidding or not, but the fact is like I'm curious. For instance, one of the things in it is that no member of the commission shall be a member of, through certain boards. There are no other commissions that have that regulation because it's not in any. I was kind of surprised it wasn't in P&Z. I'm surprised it's not on, even the Board of Selectmen. There's nothing about exempting you from another board except for the Conservation Commission.
Noreen, can I chime in? State statute
Sure.
dictates that, for example, we cannot appear before any other land use boards and commissions in the town. Some very strict rules as to what we cannot do at P&Z. So that
Right.
if it's put in the charter, that's fine. But if it's not, it does not give us the ability to.
Right.
Yeah, because being advisory, I think the issue at the time, and this is going back a little ways, you can't, some conservation commissions are sometimes synonymous with inland wetlands commissions. You designate the commission to be, like, there are towns that say that you appear before their conservation commission, but they're functioning as wetland. And I think the issue was because it was advisory, there was a concern that you could then end up with something other than it's supposed to be, which is, the group to say, hey, look, think about not doing this. Was I think the way.
Joe, I understand what you're saying, but if you want a clarification, you feel you need it.
Yeah.
Are we saying that none of these other boards or commissions need a clarification like that? It just seems strange that it just one. It's noticeable in the commission.
So I think for the land use boards, they don't know it. I would have to think about it for the other boards. It's a good question. But I mean, would we, I don't know, Ryan, have you ever had a board, a commissioner, somebody sit on your board that's on one of the others?
No, not to my knowledge. I don't know who would want to punish themselves like that.
For members of the public, I highly encourage you to serve on the Economic Development Commission.
Yeah, I think one board is enough, though.
It is fun and does good work.
There could certainly be conflicts. I'm not familiar with anybody who has served on more than one board or commission at a time, though, personally.
The only one that comes up is somebody who is also on the pension, but that to me is a very different, is serving on another board.
Yeah, that's by design too. I think
that's by design.
Yeah.
It actually says that on it, that it's going to be, it says it's going to be.
A couple people on.
But also that are the people who are not only just on the elected side, but the lay people on there are on more than one board.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
A couple people on the Coastal Resiliency Commission that serve on other boards.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, There's one that serves on the WPCA and another that serves on the Energy and Efficiency Committee. So it does exist in other
Well,
Yeah.
my point wasn't you keep that, you want to make sure who shouldn't serve. It's just that why do we only designate that with one commission, really? It was just that it
Right.
seems out of place compared to all the other write-ups.
Yeah, I think I'd even say the same thing, Noreen, is this, I think if we're going to keep all the appointed boards and commissions in the charter, we should represent them equally. So their charge should be described if we're going to describe one charge, or we should not describe them.
That was my point. That's my point.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's all because we're the baby commission.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the only one that's been formed since us, we tried to have a land use subcommittee, but Joan O'Neill was running, and that never made it into the charter. And then the Coastal Resilience Commission is the only thing that postdates us. So we were the let's actually put a little more information in. I'd say in terms of the, just in terms of having them in there, the question that came up earlier about, planning and zoning has 9 members and 3 alternates. Our charter says we have 7. We'd really like to have more, or we have people that are sort of interested in doing, like, we'd love to be on a subcommittee about light pollution, but we don't want to be coming to your meetings every month. So if there's some way to create affiliations or stop so severely limiting, because if you're a member of the commission, you have to come to 75% of the meetings, you have to be appointed. In this day and age, more flexibility in membership would be an advantage. My only other place that I work on committees is with my church, and we have frankly cut down. We don't call them committees anymore. You have work groups, and you have one specific thing you're doing, and you meet when you need to. And so we're trying to minimize the need for all of these, mandatory meetings and things like that.
I'd like to follow up on Heather's point just there, because this morning at the Board of Selectmen meeting, the Board of Selectmen established basically the continuation of a facilities working group, and that's what they titled it, and that's the language that Heather just used. And it's a little bit reflective of the fact that once you make something a committee, even if it's an ad hoc committee, it becomes much more challenging to schedule meetings and to coordinate that committee's or that group's activities. And so to the degree that you can have a working group, which is just making recommendations, so they're not able to take any action. So, in my mind, maybe all their conversations don't need to be in the full view of the public eye. It's at what point they're making recommendations to a board that can actually take action, like the Board of Selectmen, that then certainly all those conversations should be in public. But, maybe there is a place to look at in the charter whether enabling these kind of working groups to take place could be helpful for, town government operations.
One last question. Do we feel that the 75% of the regular meetings is too arduous? Should that be lowered?
That was, if I recall correctly, that was added. At the time that was added, they felt it was serving an unmet need. And maybe, I don't know, Noreen or Ron or somebody remembers, I think they increased it to 75 because we were having a problem, particularly on planning and zoning, some of those boards that can have continuous hearings where Ron alluded to the problem earlier. You go on planning and zoning because you perhaps maybe don't have a precise idea as to what the board does. And, you're going to stop everything. Well, that's not the way the world works. You're going to start everything. And people would disappear. And then it took kind of a long time to then remove them and then get a new member. I mean, that's not to say they were, I think rare is the time when the Board of Selectmen removes somebody, but you sort of need the option then to be able to call them and say, hey, you're not coming, is something wrong? So I don't know that we would drop that.
Oh,
Because
I'm just asking the
solves the
chairs what
problem.
they're, but I'm just asking the chairs if they
Yeah,
feel
sure.
that.
I think there's only been, there's been 2 or 3 times when we've had people that didn't make 50%, and it was, and we could say, they had a medical issue and they were out
Sure.
for 3 months because they had a knee replacement or something. So I wouldn't take it out, because we did have one person who came on and then disappeared for 6 months. And then I
I
found
think-
out that he'd actually resigned and nobody had told me.
I think in our case on P and Z, I think not too long ago, it was 2/3, wasn't it? It had been increased to 70. I think you have to have a level of interest in a commission like ours that you want to come to the meetings. And, you know, fortunately, we have the 3 alternates. Somebody, you know, has some difficulties making their 3/4 of the meetings. We can manage certainly in that situation. But I think that it's not required. You know, there's nothing the commission itself can do about an absent member. It falls back to the Board of Selectmen, and never in my recollection ever has anybody been removed
Yeah, I can't remember. it either,
for that purpose. It might be a carrot and a stick, but you know, the problems I remember the years of people not coming, you know, may have been the problem. They should have been there in the first place, so we didn't miss them. So I don't know. I look to the Board of Selectmen because they have the right to appoint and the right to remove, but I've never heard of anybody being removed because of attendance. They may have gotten a little slap on the wrist and said, you know, and not for my commission, I don't believe, but maybe others, to show up.
The Board of Selectmen has not reappointed, I think, 2 people in the 6 years I've been here because of attendance.
Okay.
So it's
And was-
not common.
No.
No,
And-
and because frankly, most people, if they
And that
can't
was under
serve,
reappointment rather than an actual.
Yes, it
removal.
wasn't in the middle of a term. It was
Right.
at reappointment
Okay.
time.
yeah,
And
usually
Joan-
if people aren't serving, they're going to step down.
Joan, we had, and this is talking a little bit out of school, but we're both on the same page. It was one of those on P and Z, Lauren, that you're talking about?
No.
Okay, because we had a member of P and Z who just pre-COVID kind of disappeared. And we tried to get him to attend, and he couldn't or wouldn't. And he was such a good member. He was a quality member of the commission. I thought, let's let it slide. Nothing I could do about it myself anyway.
Right.
And as that person came up for reappointment at the end of last year, he indicated to me he did not want to be reappointed. So I was just making, you know, right, John?
Yep.
And great person, great member.
Mhm.
But in that case, I thought we were better off keeping him on the commission. And it gave an opportunity for our alternates to serve more frequently and kind of go through boot camp in the real world in his
Yep.
absence. But I don't know whether you could have, you know, remove. I don't know whether you have the right to remove once you appoint.
Right.
I'm not
So
sure.
by charter, the Board of Selectmen, I believe, can remove. But I think the 75% serves its function because it highlights if
Right.
there's an issue.
Well,
Well,
I
keeping
want
an
to
eye on-
apologize. I have to leave because I'm performing a wedding ceremony in a few minutes. So thank
Oh,
you all.
I think you should leave your computer active and bring it with you so we can
Yes.
see
and
you.
let us
Oh,
see.
All in favor, say I do.
I know, really. Thank you,
Oh, you must be
guys.
doing
This
it by
is
Zoom.
very informative. I really appreciate all the input.
So looking at the clock, are there any other questions for our land use commission? So one, I would leave you I'm saying land use, we have economic development. I would leave you with this thought: to the extent that things like what I was talking about before, structural things, having the selectmen having to, you know, report on the plan of the town, or even report on usually we have a checklist at the end of the plan of conservation development, if we still do, you know, sort of the planometric standard issue 1, you know, give a report on how we're doing on it. You know, if that type of thing, or if you get better ideas,
Right.
that's the type of thing that we could reasonably charterize.
Okay, so I'm going to say that the 2000 Plan of Conservation and Development had the TPAC, which I don't remember what it stands for. But that committee was charged with making sure that the action items in the Plan of Conservation Commission got done. The Plan of
Town
Conservation
Plan
Development.
Advisory Committee.
Yeah, that was awesome. Come to the next one, we didn't have that. We don't even had that sort of thing. I think so. If we could put, that's the sort of thing I could see if you put in the charter that you update the Plan of Conservation Development, and then you have a group that's going to make sure it gets done. Because I think it did make a huge difference between the two from my experience.
Yeah, or frankly, give that as a role to the Board of Selectmen. They have to report on the town plan. If they choose to muster a committee to assist them, it's their choice.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
or look across the table and ask Dave, like, hey, how do we do this thing? But you know, it's so that give that some thought. Are there any other questions from the Charter Review Commission for this group?
No, just thanks for your time, for sure.
Appreciate everything that you folks are doing. That is not an easy task to undertake, and really appreciate what you're trying to accomplish. Nice and sincere.
And when we learn what we're trying to accomplish, please let us know, Ron. I think we could take your wisdom on that point.
I was just hoping you'd find something in there where you could appoint a special guest P&Z chair.
Yeah,
Where, you know, like they're doing at Jeopardy. And here for the legend, we'll have Joe McDougal.
Please, attendance would drop. The you know, we'll see if we could raffle it off. It'll be a pro revenue function. We can sell it on Charity Buzz. It'll be exciting.
Yeah, I feel you on that, Ron. I'm like, okay, it's really somebody else could be chair now. Really.
Heather, I don't want to give up your streak. You may be the longest sitting chairman.
Oh no, I did get 9 months off. Fran Brady did it. But so I got a sabbatic, but I'm back.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for coming. I really appreciate it. And Dave, if you and your committees have thoughts on that other piece, I would really welcome some feedback.
Yeah, I definitely will. I'll give you some thought. Thank you.
And if there's anything on our side that you want some more follow-up or any more information, feel free to call me, or you know, we could even, you know, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, we could have you in for a planning meeting to pick our brains, if that would help with your tasks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll keep that in mind.
Purpose, so be it. We'll do it.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for everything you're doing.
Thank
These are
you.
hard boards.
All right.
Excellent.
Right.
All right. So we're pushing nearer to 6:30. Lauren, I want to take a second and remind myself, I believe we had talked about meeting, were we skipping next week and then meeting the 20th and 27th? I think that was
Yes.
right.
Skipping the 13th, the 20th with Ira and a review of questions in the charter document, and then the 27th with me and a deep dive into more articles in the charter.
Right. So that, and then I think channeling my inner Joan, although she's not here, she's doing nuptials. Maybe then we could start to work on, take part of our time on the 27th and talk about, now that we've met with a whole lot of boards, talk about sort of either an every other week status or some way to make progress, but to lighten the meeting schedule, or not, if you choose not to. You could do twice a week. It'd be fun. Eventually, we'll be able to do it in, like, you know, in town hall, which would be cool.
It'd be
Does
good
that
to
schedule
talk.
still work for everybody?
Mhm.
Okay. It's pushing to 6:30. We have, so I think the only other thing we have is public now. I actually opened the minutes,
Approving
but they're buried.
minutes.
Yeah, we have to move the
Minutes.
minutes in public comment. And we do not have posted review of the charter in this agenda, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So any questions on the minutes themselves? Can I get a motion to approve them?
Motion to approve.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Noreen, you didn't wave.
I'm sorry. I thought last week was the week we were skipping, so I can't support that. I can't vote. I wasn't at the meeting.
Oh, sorry.
I had my days mixed up. Sorry
Oh.
about that.
Well, that's okay. You can come to the meeting when we don't have it and just, hang out.
Well, you know
Right.
what? I'm in the process of moving after 37 years in one house. And
Wow.
I'm packing, and life is, well, I can tell you, start to do this when you're younger, folks. So in life, days do get ahead of me. I'm almost done. We're almost finished. We're almost made the move, but thank you. But I can't help you tonight with the minutes.
No problem. All right. Well, minutes are passed then. And then any questions or comments from members of the public?
Good discussion today. I'm not public, but
Very good.
Jen Gordon has her hand raised.
Please.
Hi, this is Jen Gordon, 34 Lenore Drive. Not so much a question, but well, an invitation, so to speak. I am president of the Madison Newcomers Club this year, and I'm wondering if anybody from the committee would like to come and speak at one of our monthly general membership meetings, because we do have a lot of new people in town from outside of the state of Connecticut. And if they're anything like me, when I moved here from Maryland, this is a very different form of government than
It must seem like a
experienced.
Martian government, right? Walking into it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I, tell people back in Maryland, I've never voted so many times in my life as I have in the 4 years that I've been here. But I just think it might be helpful. I've been kind of poking my head into your meetings and hearing some things that maybe some people think that the Board of Selectmen, when they vote for them, they're fully representing all of their choices as it pertains to other referendums and whatnot that come up. So I think there, is a possibility that people may not fully understand the importance of our charter and the power that it gives us as community members to vote on matters that are important to us. And just also to kind of help highlight the ways that people could get involved with all of the different committees and whatnot that town has.
So sure, who'd like to do it? I mean, I'm assuming walking around your house, you didn't stumble across a Charter Review Commission member.
I thought there was somebody lurking around.
I would be happy to do that. Absolutely.
Fantastic, thank you.
Now you should ask him for something else. Okay.
Yes, while this is all being recorded and on public forum.
So, and truth be told, actually, I'm a little ashamed I didn't think of it myself. It's a great idea because you're absolutely right. Frankly, I remember back in the day that part of newcomers, that's what got people interested in joining boards.
Right.
Because they used to talk about it, in newcomers, 800 years ago,
Well, I
about
have
how
to
the
say,
boards worked. And it was a great idea.
That's how I got Matt to make sure he was paying attention to the emails. We had Noreen come and speak with us. I believe it was last year when we were up at the Edge in Madison. And then we had Aaron Duquesne come and speak to us in September or October. I can't remember which. So I just, with all of the things going on in town and in the state and everything, just to make people more aware of what their powers are as citizens and ways to be involved. I think you guys would probably offer the best scope of information, the greatest scope of information for the members.
And to the extent they ever feel, Enviro, or if you want to talk about even the other boards, I'm happy to do it as well.
Okay, awesome.
We could even do a duo.
Awesome. Good.
Be fun.
Perfect. I love it.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. Lauren, do we have anybody else who wants to talk?
That's it.
All right. So we've got 2 sessions then of document review. So Ira, last I spoke to him, he's going to come and talk his way through the document. And hopefully what Ira will give us, it'll be a little bit different than what Lauren gave us. Maybe not, we'll see, is a bit of what he's seen other towns do. Because he's town council and done charter for several towns, hopefully that will be informative to us. And I believe I asked him, and I think he thought he was going to go about 45 minutes. Lauren, maybe you can touch base with him to see what his timing is like, or perhaps even share your red line with him so he doesn't duplicate. It'd be one thing to have him talk through a change you've already made. So let's see if we can do that for efficiency. If we can shorten his time because of something like that, then we'll use the rest of our time to start the Lauren review, and then we'll just do more Lauren Lauren review the next time. Sorry, Lauren, you get to be the literally, we're going to name the charter after you from now on. We'll include it in there, and then we'll see. Lauren, do you have a sense, by the way, as to if we devote a session or a session and a half, you know, at the rate we're going, how much would you assume we could chunk out of it? I mean, some of the things are pretty quick. Some of the things are fundamental and they just take more thinking, and they may involve us talking about more other people in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably 2/3 of what's in the charter now and is redlined is things that you guys could get through within 1 or 2 sessions. And then those bigger ticket items like threshold amounts, quorum numbers,
Yeah.
CEO, those are going to take more research. And those are the things that you might want to subcommittee for and say, you know, 2 or 3 of you are really passionate about form of government / CEO, and 2 or 3 are really passionate about financial threshold obligations. So that's something that you guys might want to actually break up and then present findings to the committee at large so that you can make a kind of a more educated review and change of that charter.
Well, maybe, and you guys tell me if this works, maybe as we're going through it in these next 2 sessions, why don't we sort of start, I think we know what the issues are, but let's start a tally of even, you know, say, let's save that for the controversial list or the big thought list. And then we can see what those are. And I like, Lauren, I like your suggestion about breaking some of them up, but also taking some things like town manager, we should just trigger an open hearing, you know, put it in the paper, you know, try and get everyone to come in, because it's probably the single biggest thing that's shown up at each of our hearings.
Mm-hmm.
And
may I ask Lauren too, if we're going to be doing a lot of this with Lauren, is there any way you could look back and see what happened to the whole idea of the position of chief administrative officer? I guess it was the section 7 point something. And
7.3, yeah. And
no one knows what happened. Because
No.
I know when Fillmore was on the board of selectmen, I think Al was first selectman, Al Goldberg. We were pushing for that role, that position. And I know we were referring to it, so I don't know what happened.
My recollection, Noreen, 'cause I don't think Fillmore wasn't on the board of selectmen. You and I were that.
No, I'm
time.
sorry. He was board of finance. He was chairman of the board of finance.
Yeah.
And my recollection was that Al was trying to appoint sort of the person who was working for him, who was serving in that role, into that position.
Right.
And he was getting advice that would be extra charter, so that he couldn't do it. I have a hard time actually coming to that conclusion for the charter as it sits, you know, and maybe when we get to that part, we should just talk about, I sense some of the limitations on the charter are a little bit, ecclesiastical in the reasoning that goes through it. You know, it says what it says, and there are a lot of things it doesn't say.
But you know, Joe, I think the point was Al was asking for an option. It was an option. We wanted to be able to give an option on the charter, not that you had to.
Right.
You didn't have to. You could do it if you wanted to.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to provide that. Because some people walk into the position, they're just CEO types, and others aren't. And we should be able to give them the flexibility to have that option. That's what it was all about, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you're not changing form of government, then having, you know, there is nothing really in the charter that dictates what the support staff is and what those job titles have to be. So, I mean, that would really be more of an operational, initiative.
You know, we could
fundamental thing about the form of government here, guys. I really think, you know, it needs to be addressed.
I think 2 things. I think one, that if I recall the issue correctly, I think I do, that Al was getting advice saying that he just couldn't appoint a COO of one of his staff, that would be tantamount to a town manager. And I have a heart, maybe we should even ask that question of Ira. You know what, Noreen, it's not a bad idea to find out what's there, but that's a very different question. I think what Bob was just saying, which is the town manager, someone who survives the term of an elected official, is a very different proposition. And if I've heard one message from our various speakers now, what are they asking for? Notably, all the sort of professionals or people who are appointed for a long time, it's continuity, right?
You know what, Joe, but I noticed your last meeting, looking at the minutes, that that government review group reported back. They only interviewed towns that had town managers. They didn't go out. I gave them lists. I'm from Stratford, Connecticut, and Stratford had a long-term we used to have, town manager. And they really ran into problems, and they've switched over. They never were called. I talked to the mayor.
Maybe the report wasn't clear from the government study committee, Noreen, but they did interview towns that had every different form of government. I know off the top of my
I went
head.
and looked at their notes. I went and looked at their notes. I
Yeah,
really would like to have, I'd like to have Bob Hubbard, who was on that committee, and I thought he was going to be at your meeting last time, because he has a very different recollection
well,
about what
Bob
really
Hubbard
happened.
was appointed mid-committee.
Right,
So he
right.
wasn't there when they did all the interviews, but off the top of my head, I know that they interviewed Wallingford, which has a strong mayor form of government. Dickerson's been
But did they have a
for
town manager
years.
before?
No.
That's
No.
what they were supposed to be. See, they had 2 towns that had town manager, and switched back. And those,
Hartford
they
and
were
New
expecting a
London.
call. They were expecting a
Hartford and
call.
New London were the towns that CCM had given me that had switched back. So Stratford was CCM did not have that information on Stratford when I talked
Okay.
to them. So that would be why, I didn't
Right,
give that
I was given the
information.
wrong information, Lauren, but
Yeah.
I did talk to the mayor of Stratford. As I said, it's my hometown, and she would be more than happy to speak to us. She became mayor after the change, she was
Mhm.
not the first mayor again, but definitely has strong opinions on what happened to that. It's really a small city, but what happened in Stratford.
So you know what to do? I think, Noreen, to the extent, as we go through these lists and we triage the big ones, I think anyway I look at it, that issue is going to be a multi-meeting
Right.
type of thing. And to your point, we can think about the scheduling of it to give time to bring in some of the other people. I think I'd mentioned I wanted to bring in some people from Mansfield that have had a town manager, sort of the flip side, for a long time, to see how it settled in. Bring somebody that had it and removed it. We can sort of cue in some of that, and maybe bring government studies back for a bit, because their recommendation was the discussion we had last time was, I would say, overwhelmingly suggesting that we provide the ability for a town manager form of government.
But Joe, that's not what came out of that meeting, that committee meeting. And Lauren, at the end, it was going in that direction. And then people started to speak out, and they really could not recommend a town manager. And I know the chairman wanted it, and he was directing it, but I've spoken to 2 members who said, really, we realized most of us didn't. And other people started to say, I don't like it either.
Noreen, if I can say something, I was actually at the last meeting we had, and the gentleman who chaired that government studies committee was totally clear that there was no consensus.
Right. No, I know that. I know that.
In his group. He wasn't pretending that there was.
Did he say that last month when you?
Yes.
last week?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you know what,
The men who came
Yeah.
were very in favor of it, but they said,
Right.
and I can't remember the name of the second person.
Bob Reinhardt is. the
Bob,
second.
Bob Reinhardt said, I remember him saying, all that being said, we still couldn't come to consensus
Mhm.
on the piece. They sort of gave the strong arguments, but
Yeah.
they couldn't come to consensus.
And
And I think also,
it was clear they didn't have the votes. They didn't have the votes on it. And it was clear that it was pretty far away. I would just definitely, and I would be happy to get you the number, Lauren, for Mayor Hoydick in Stratford. And again, come in here, we just haven't, Bruce Wilson said it to us when he came, what problem are you solving? And you know what? There's 2 sides to that. And I think personally, I'm proud of the town form of government, town meeting form of government. I think it's just over 100 towns in Connecticut have the town meeting form of government. And I think Connecticut is pretty special, especially small towns, pretty special. So I think we've got to be very careful of what we're doing here. That's all.
Well, we need a full discussion of.
I agree.
And it's interesting that you brought up town meeting, because I would argue that we don't have a town meeting form of government. Get serious. That's not where the decisions are made. And it is connected to the question of, do we have a strong mayor system or a city manager, or using other terms? This is all connected, and it's something we need to see what's happening elsewhere in Connecticut and even other states, and what the research is. And
that's a great idea. I think we should. I felt with the committee, Lauren, to be quite honest, with the little I followed it, I didn't feel it was as open as I would have liked. To be quite honest with you, I was uncomfortable with some of the things I saw.
Well,
But that
Noreen,
was just my opinion.
yeah, Noreen, I wouldn't overemphasize the Government Studies Committee. It was partially interrupted by COVID. I think that we've had a lot of people who engage with the town day in, day out as staff, as elected officials, as we just heard from Ron, No Shrinking Violet, that they're concerned about continuity. So there is a problem being expressed to us, to Bruce's point. Now, whether that means that A, it's a problem that isn't for the charter, or B, all we need to do is just enable the possibility for the charter. Right now, the charter is telling people, no, you can't think about it for another 10 years, because it's not even in there. Or C, whether we put it up for a recommendation of a vote. Those are three very different decisions. That middle decision is really about, hey, do you make it charter possible? And then the next group, the Board of Selectmen, could go and have their full meeting with lots of public outreach to see if they bring it to a vote or not. So we've got some stuff to talk about. But I remember when Bruce said that, but I have to say, I'm surprised at how many people have now come to us in a short period of time and said, the continuity issue is a big deal. I think it's happened in each of our meetings. So it feels like there's a problem. I wouldn't have thought so when I was a selectman. But then again, frankly, Noreen, I remember for a big part of when I was a selectman, we had Fillmore, who was a professional manager, retired, who showed, and an MIT graduate. And despite that, was dropped into the management slot and for many years for continuity. And I just don't know that that you always kind of get that.
Well, Joe, I wanted to say that I think Bob's right. We should definitely have this conversation.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great idea to do it very publicly and have a large public hearing on it. Maybe we can get 150 people like planning and zoning. I think it's great. But the fact is, as you know, at town meetings, people who don't have objections don't come to the meetings. People that are happy the way things are going don't come to the meetings. So they're not showing up at our meetings and talking to about what's going on. So I just would like to, I just think that side, people that are happy the way things are going, or really, really love the way our town is run.
Sure.
They're not coming to our meetings saying, oh, keep it the way it is. You're not hearing from them. So just want to bring the balance in, that's all.
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
Another question, by the way.
Hold on,
there
Bob,
is
if I could,
research on who actually
Lauren,
does
go ahead,
show up
please.
to town meetings, but-
Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
I also, because I think about the work of your committee a lot, because this is something that I'm, involved with in town campus. I've been thinking lately that along the lines of this discussion of town manager, continuity, staff, form of government, things like that. If you guys are open to it or you want me to, I think it might be helpful if we went to CCM and said, of these towns that still have a mayor or a first selectman, and under their town meeting form of government, what is the staff in that person's office? So do they have a chief of staff? And is that where the continuity is being found in these other towns? Madison doesn't have a chief of staff. So I think that if you guys are open to that, I'm happy to get some research going now. That way we have it when the time comes for this broader conversation of are they achieving continuity a different way?
That's a good point.
Yeah, Lauren, I think that's excellent. And I do want to not lose the question to Ira too, because if there's some argument that the current charter would prevent a first selectman for structuring that way,
yes.
I don't see it. I feel the advice was a little weird at the time, but maybe I'm absolutely wrong. So I'd like someone who does this all the time to come and advise us at it. On it to see if it's there, because if it's there, then we should think about how to fix it. We're now pushing well beyond the time that I promised you guys. Are we good? Are we good moving along?
Yeah.
I assume we have no other members from the public looking to speak to us?
Nope.
In that case, can we adjourn?
So
All in
moved.
favor?
Great.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Meeting,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Everyone.
Thank you all.
Learning a lot.
Thank you. This was really good.